let's get back to it. When last we saw our web page, we had a div container, and inside the div container, let me move down to the code. There's our div container. Inside the div container, we had header. We did not have that yet. So we have this header section right here, beginning and end. The next thing I want to add would be then this header. And it works just like you read. Inside of this, I have header, then nav, then section, then aside. In the same way I put header and all these other things inside the div container, I'm going to put the articles inside of section. Okay, but next is nav. So let's worry about getting nav on the page. So here, after header, I made a new space right here. I'm going to go to the insert panel and I'm going to pick navigation. I don't need to give it a class or an ID, and there it is. I'm going to hit delete to remove the content that it has, and then I'm going to make a rule for it. So I'm going to close this up, get back on my designer, go to style. I'm going to make sure that I have nav picked, because that will make, when I pick the selector, whatever I have selected over here, it's going to write that for me, so I have to do a little less writing. The problem is when I hit this, it's going to be too specific. I don't need to know about the container part, just nav, it will be enough. And I can use my up and down arrow keys to make this more specific or less specific. So if I hit the up arrow key, whoops, well, that was the less specific. Nav is all I need. Let's try this again. That was down arrow key, and that's not going to go to body. Okay, anyway. So up and down arrow keys to make this less specific. I want nav, and then I'm going to hit return, and I'll write a rule for nav. So my nav is going to be, remember double click here, it's going to be 100 wide and 200 tall. I'm going to give it a color, which is orange, apparently. Which is going to be right here. Oh, there's a lovely orange color, or I can pick one from here. We'll talk more about the color picker and how to use that later. Hit enter to accept it. Now again, I need the padding around the outside, or the margin around the outside. Padding is different. Padding actually goes the inside. So margin, I'm going to select these all out, make sure that they're linked together, and I'm going to type 25 again and hit enter to accept that. So there, nav so far. Now, one thing I need to do with these things is set them to float left. And we'll talk more about what that means later. But right now I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to look underneath this one. There's 3 little boxes there. Under here says float, and this will be float left. And we'll click on that. And the same thing for this. If I just click here, it should take me to the header one, and I'm going to do the same thing. I want it to float left. Nothing really happened here, but it added a rule that said to float left over here. Okay, so next we're going to add in, after nav, we want a section. Is that right? Yes, section, aside, and footer. Let's go ahead and put all those in right now. So right here, I'm going to close this guy up. I'm going to go to insert, and then I'm going to go to section. I'm going to click on that, say OK, hit delete. Now I have a section start and an end right here. After section, I want the aside, so I'm going to go insert, where did you go? Oh, here it is, aside, and I'll say OK. You can see what it did to my code over here. It added that in, and after that I want footer. So here's the footer. I'll say OK. I'll delete the contents, and then I have the footer opening and closing tag here. Inside of section, I want article, and I want it twice. So while that's there, that's where I'm going to insert it. I'm going to go to article and say OK. Delete the content again. And then actually, I can just copy and paste this right in the code itself. So Command C to copy, and to paste Command V. All right, so now I have all the structure, but I don't see it over here because I haven't styled it. So let's go and give it some style now. All right, So let's get this down and this guy out, back to style. And the first thing we're going to style is the section. So I'm going to select this section. And when I make this, I'm going to use my down arrow key to make that less specific. Up arrow key apparently. Section only, and then hit return, right? And for section, my section is, I think it's 250 wide. Let's try that. 250 and oops, 200 and I'm going to give it some color. What color? Ooh, pink. That will be so nice. There it is. And I'll hit return. I need to come back here and margin again, 25. And then I'm also going to float it to the right, like so. And now you can see at the top of that little line right there, those are my articles kind of hanging out waiting to be styled. Okay, so now you can see kind of what the float did. Help it put it to the float left actually lets this allow things to float to the left of it. Okay, next we're going to style the article, the aside that's on the other side. It has the same size as the navigation, so instead of doing all that again, we're just going to kind of borrow from that selector. So if I go into the selectors again, let me move this down, and I see that I have navigation here, I can right click or control click on it and say duplicate. And then I just need to type aside. And when I do that, it should apply all of those rules to this one. Okay, I just duplicated it. So if I look up here, nav was just taken here and duplicated. So they're identical except for the selector itself. All of the attributes are the same. So next, I can do the same thing with header. If I grab, do the header, and I duplicate it, and I call it footer, then it puts it down here at the bottom. It's too big, so I will change the height property, and I will change that to 50. And now, if we take a look at the design view, then go to live view here, we can see that that is done exactly what we want it to do. All right, so off of live view. Live view is just kind of like previewing it in a web browser engine. It gives you a pretty good idea of how it's going to look when you hit a web browser, but still the right way to look at it is in a web browser, and we'll talk more about live view and all these other buttons that we get later. So back to split view. What I'm going to do here in the header section is I'm just going to type in Brian's homepage. Okay. And then I'm going to hit return. And when I do that in my code, when I start typing and I hit return, it puts a P tag around these things. So a P tag is a paragraph tag, and it's just something else that I can style. So with this selected, I want to make sure that that's selected, or at least my cursor's in there. I'm going to go down to the properties panel at the bottom, and I'm going to look, I'm going to make sure it says HTML here, and then I'm going to change the paragraph P tag here to H1 or heading 1, and now I have an H1 tag. It has its own specific size and everything. Unless you change it, it's just going to stay that way, and it'll be different for everybody's computer depending on the computer and the browser they're using. So I'm going to write a little H1 rule right now. So I'm going to go to style here, and then we're going to do a plus and less specific that down to just H1 and hit return. And what I want to do is under properties, let me slide this up here a bit. I want to change the text, so I'm going to go to the text selector here, and I'm going to change the font family to Gotham, Helvetica, Helvetica, blah, blah, blah. So the one that starts with Gotham here. I want to put a little padding on this side of it right there. So I'm going to go back to the layout and go for padding. And this time I just want it on the left. So I'm going to type in here 15 and hit enter. And you see it push that over. Okay, so that's styled. Now I'm going to click on my navigation box right here. And then I'm going to just start typing. Okay, I'm going to type home. I'm going to hit return. And I'm going to type about. One more time, and contact. This will be our navigation things, okay? And I can see over here that inside of my nav, I have these 3 paragraph tags. So I can style those with a descendant selector that says whenever you see a P tag inside of navigation, then do this style. And that's what we're going to do in the next movie. So come back and see me.